And how are you employed, sir?
I am currently employed with the Massachusetts State Police.
And how long have you been a trooper with the state police?
I have been a trooper for approximately 8.5 years.
And
12.5 years. I apologize.
And where is it that you're currently assigned within the state police?
I am currently assigned to our collision analysis and reconstruction section, otherwise known as CARS, our recon.
What, if any, specialized training do you undergo in regard to crash reconstruction?
So when before I got into the unit, I was sent to 3 separate classes. Each class was 40 hours long. So the first class is basic at-scene crash investigation. Next one's advanced crash investigation, and the other one's traffic crash reconstruction.
What do you do for a living, sir?
I'm a biomechanical engineer and accident reconstructionist.
Can you tell us what education, training, and background qualifies you to perform your duties as the director for biomechanics and human factors?
Sure. Well, I've got my BS in mechanical engineering with a minor in biomedical engineering from Carnegie Mellon University in 1995. I then went on to get my master's in bioengineering and biomechanical engineering from the University of Pittsburgh in 2002. And then I went to get my doctorate or my PhD in bioengineering and biomechanics from the University of Pittsburgh in 2004.
So your specialty, your subfield, if you will, in terms of your engineering degree and education is literally in accident reconstruction and the effect that accidents and incidents can have on the human body. Is that right?
It is, yes. And biomechanics is really, it's looking at injury to the human body. So, we use traditional engineering principles and apply it to the body because an injury is just an engineering problem. Instead of looking at a piece of steel that if you know the dimensions and size and you apply a force, it'll bend and break. We look at the human body. How much force does it take and how does the force have to be applied to get a humerus fracture or an intervertebral disc injury or any type of injury? There's specific forces and mechanisms you need to produce those injuries. And that's what I do as a biomechanical engineer.
You were told Boston police officer was involved, the vehicle pedestrian incident, the car was going in reverse, and ultimately led to the death of the pedestrian. Struck the pedestrian in reverse, correct?
Correct.
All right. And you were assigned specifically to try to reconstruct that incident.
Yes.
Have you ever heard of the phrase confirmation bias?
I know the phrase, yes.
You know what it means?
I can't definitely say what it means.
Developing a conclusion and then trying to find evidence to fit that conclusion. Does that sound right?
If you say so.
So we really approach injuries from 2 different directions. Someone has an injury, you go to the doctor, you go to the hospital, the medical doctor will diagnose that injury, determine the best way to treat it, and determine what the prognosis is. As a biomechanical engineer, I look at that injury from a different direction. Here's the injury. Well, how did that injury occur? What type of loading did you need to actually produce that injury? How much force was required? What happened to your body to actually cause that injury to occur?
So he gets hit by the car, not his torso, just the arm. The taillight cracks, and as it passes by, his arm stays with it long enough to get striations, those scratches that we see, those lacerations, those abrasions that we see, right?
In a sense, yes.
And at the same time, he does a pirouette and flies 30 feet to his final point of rest.
I don't know if he did a pirouette.
Well, I'm using the word pirouette. He spun around.
He started rotating counterclockwise. I don't know how far he ran counterclockwise, but he started rotating. According to that, would push him to rotate counterclockwise. Whether or not he went counterclockwise all the way to his back toward the ground, it seems like a most likely possibility.
Did you account for the fact that his arm is on a hinge?
Is what? Say again?
Did you account for the fact in this scenario that you just told the jurors that his arm is on a hinge?
On a
hinge.
hinge.
Shoulder?
Okay.
Right? So, your arm got hit. Didn't his arm just swing?
I said arm and shoulder area, so his arm could have been considered part of it.
Even if his shoulder got the upper,
okay.
Pointing to his upper biceps.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's no injuries on his shoulder, not a single one, not even a bruise, right?
like I said, it looked like to me it was from up here. I don't know how far I can up back here, but it was up here.
Well,
So
you're the one that talked about his injuries on his arm.
yes.
That's limited to about mid-biceps to about mid-forearm, correct?
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
No injuries on the shoulder, no injuries on the torso, no injuries on the ribs, no injuries on the back, correct? Is that right?
Yes.
So your theory is you got hit on the arm, took the brunt of the force from the taillight on the arm, stayed with the vehicle long enough for the taillight to explode, basically, to shatter. Then these striations get on his arm, abrasions. Does a pirouette, a spin, counterclockwise, and flies 30 feet in the air to his point of rest.
Yeah, it happened probably a little faster than that, though.
I thought you said he hit his head on the curb.
I said that's one of the possibilities of when you look at the roadway, as he gets spun around kind of clockwise, it's a possibility that the curb is there, any blunt force object on the ground, as the ground is pretty blunt.
So did you look specifically to find whether or not you could determine the forces required for Mr. O'Keefe to suffer the injuries that you saw in the records, medical records, et cetera?
I did, yes. I determined in my analysis whether there was sufficient force with that damaged taillight and interaction with that taillight to produce any of the injuries that were listed or diagnosed in the autopsy report in the medical records.
What, generally speaking, what injuries would you expect to see in a vehicle-pedestrian interaction at, say, 24 miles per hour?
24 miles an hour, once you get up to that speed, you start to see fractures. You see significant ligament and tendon damage. I mean, usually about 15 mile an hour impact is where you start to see damage to, for instance, the leg and the knee. At that speed, you're going to produce, if you impact the vehicle, you're going to produce upwards of 1,000 pounds of force on the body, depending on what part of your body impacts the vehicle. So certainly at 25 miles an hour, you start to see significant injuries occur.
Is that true for any part of the body that is struck, whether it's center mass or an extremity? 1,000 pounds of force because of the speed of the vehicle?
Well, force is equal, Newton's second law of force is equal to mass times acceleration. So the acceleration is going to be the same. It depends on the mass of whatever body part's being hit. So from the testing that we did at 15 miles an hour, we used a head form which weighs about 11 pounds. And that produced almost 1,000 pounds of force, a little under that for the head. So anything that weighs 11 pounds is going to produce almost 1,000 pounds of force. The heavier the object, if you get hit center mass, that's going to be even greater force because that's more mass than just 11 pounds. So the acceleration is the same for each body part. It just depends on the weight of the body part and how heavy it is to determine the force that's actually exerted on the body.
Did you review, in furtherance of your conclusions and opinions, did you review records that indicated injuries to both a head as well as an arm, the right extremity, right arm?
I did, yes, sir.
Taking those one at a time, is the injury to the head that you saw consistent with having been struck by a vehicle at 24 miles per hour?
It is not, no, sir.
Can you explain why that is?
There's a couple of reasons. First of all, and the main reason is that to get the injury, it was a fracture at the occipital region of the head, which is basically on the back bottom part of the head. So in order to have that part of the head contacted by the taillight, you would somehow have to have a configuration or be standing in a manner that the rest of your body doesn't get hit because there's no other significant injuries to the body. If there's enough force to cause a skull fracture, then there's going to be certainly enough force to cause injury to the rest of the body. So first of all, you have to determine how could you configure somebody could actually be standing to have only the head impacted, the back of the head. And even if that was the case, if somebody positioned themselves in such a manner to have that occur, you're still going to see other injuries related to that. For instance, with the cervical spine, over 1,000 pounds of force acting on the head, you're going to get significant cervical injuries, fractures, disc injuries, tendon and ligament injuries. So the fact that we only have that head injury and only damage to the occipital portion of the skull is inconsistent in this case with being struck by that tail light. And then there's also the evidence that we saw when we did the testing. At 15 miles an hour, where we dropped the head form. So that would be akin or like a vehicle backing up at 15 miles an hour hitting the head. We had more damage to the taillight in that test than what we saw with the subject taillight cover. So if you're going 24 or 25 miles an hour, even faster, you're going to see even greater damage, greater fracturing of that rear taillight, and we just don't have that in this case. So both the physical evidence as well as looking at the biomechanical aspects of it are inconsistent with that head injury occurring due to impact with the rear of the Lexus.
Shifting to the arm, are the same forces at play if instead of making contact with a head, you make contact with an arm, an outstretched arm?
They are. You know, I just explained the force is mass times acceleration. So if the arm weighs the same as the head, you're still going to get that same force, almost 1,000 pounds.
Does the arm weigh the same as the head?
It does, actually, almost identical, because your arm, just one of your arms, including the hand, forearm, and upper arm, is about 5% of your total body weight. So for someone who weighs 216 pounds, that comes out to about 10.8 pounds. So your arm, basically your whole arm, is about the same, weighs the same as your head.
So is your analysis the same then if the arm, close to an 11-pound arm, made contact with the taillight traveling 24 miles an hour, at 15 miles an hour, would you expect even more damage to the taillight at a higher speed?
Yes, you would. If it's higher than 15 miles an hour and you have an arm actually striking that taillight, you're going to get even more significant fracturing, more damage to that taillight at a higher speed than what we saw.
So was the taillight damage consistent or inconsistent with striking an arm?
It was, our findings was it's inconsistent for a number of reasons, but it's inconsistent with striking the arm. Yes, sir.
Okay. What kind of damage would you expect to see on the arm, irrespective of the vehicle?
You can see significant damage on the arm, especially if it hits at that taillight. Enough force to actually cause fracture of that taillight, that force is going to be concentrated at an initial point. And you're going to see at that point, you're going to see probably the most damage to the arm and to the skin there. So remember, at 15 miles an hour, that's about almost 1,000 pounds. So 24, 25, it's even greater. So that amount of force on the arm, certainly you're going to see extensive subcutaneous lacerations, bruising, contusions. You're going to see most likely fracture of the arm as well. You're going to see significant damage. Just imagine having your arm out and being struck by a car at 25 miles an hour. There's going to be significant damage, more so compared to simply the abrasions that were diagnosed and documented on the arm in this case.
Is it consistent, in your view, with engineering principles and physics principles that you know, if an arm is hit, extended, not the body, just the arm is struck, for the body then to be projected?
It's not, no. So if we have contact, your arm's down, we have contact to the arm. I mean, first of all, it's a ball and socket joint, so the arm can move independently of the rest of the body. So with enough force, even if you're contracting your arm and trying to hold it out as tight as possible, it's going to overcome that muscular contraction and basically just move the arm.
Now, sir, based on the totality of your analysis and your investigation in this case, what, if any, conclusions did you come to as to how this collision sequence occurred or how this crash occurred?
Yes. Should I go to my report for that, or should you want me to just kind of go off the...
Are you asking to look at your report? Is that what?
Yes.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
We continue?
If you could, please.
Okay.
What, if any, conclusions did you come to through the course of your investigation?
So on Saturday, January 29th, 2022, at approximately 12:45.
So you can look at your report, but you can't read your report.
I'm
So
reading my conclusions based on what they asked me to do. Okay.
yeah.
So this collision occurred on Saturday, January 29th, 2022, at approximately 12:45 hours. A 2021 Lexus LX570 was traveling southbound on on Fairview Road, in Area 34 Fairview Road.
Objection, Your Honor.
Yeah.
It appears that.
So,
Sorry, I'm trying to oppose it.
you know what? I don't, Mr. Lally, break this down. Ask
Yes, please.
simple questions so that the witness can answer your questions. We don't need a narrative.
From your investigation, what, if any, conclusions did you come to as to where this collision occurred?
So, all right. So, on the night of Saturday, January 22, at approximately 12:45 hours, a 2021 Lexus LX 570.
Could you slow down, sir?
Yes.
So forget all that part,
Okay.
Trooper.
All
Just
right.
answer the question.
Okay.
Where did it occur?
It occurred in the area 34 Fairview Road.
And who, if anyone, were the participants in this collision sequence?
The operator appeared to be Karen Reed, and the pedestrian was John O'Keefe.
And where was the vehicle located in reference to the residents of 34 Fairview Road?
It was located along the southbound travel lane and to the left side of the house as you look at it from the front.
And as far as the vehicle, what, if any, directionality did it head in, and what, if any, interaction did it have with Mr. O'Keefe?
So the vehicle was traveling in reverse along the southbound travel lane, traveling north.
And how fast was the vehicle traveling and over what distance?
The vehicle traveled up to 24 miles per hour and approximately 62 feet.
And at the time that the vehicle was traveling approximately 24 miles per hour over approximately 62 feet, what, if anything, occurred then?
The right rear of the Lexus struck the pedestrian John O'Keefe.
And post-collision, what, if anything, occurred with regard to Mr. O'Keefe?
Mr. O'Keefe was projected forward and to the left along the front yard of 34 Fairview Road.
And post-collision with Mr. O'Keefe, what, if anything, did the defendant's vehicle do?
The Lexus continued traveling in reverse before they left the area.
So we don't know what happened in this case. There's no indication of, certainly, it's not consistent with getting hit by the car and ending up where he did, even if the ground is somehow hard enough to cause that type of an injury. Again, there's no movement and no force to get his body over there, and then the damage with the car is inconsistent with him being struck by it. So whether the ground could cause it or not, the roadway could cause it, the curb could cause it, a back could cause it. There's numerous different possibilities, and we don't really have enough evidence in this case to determine what one specific event actually caused that injury.
You didn't have enough evidence based on what you were provided. Isn't that fair to say?
I didn't have enough evidence based on what I was provided, and even looking at the additional evidence that I became aware of after the fact, there's still no evidence. I mean, you can't deny the science and the physics as to what would have happened if he was struck by the vehicle. So anything past that, you have to somehow overcome that hurdle, which is very difficult to do.